Hi, everyone. I'm glad you could join us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about starting a fall garden and all the easy ways it is to start a fall garden and some great tips on some specific vegetables for y'all. My name is Kiki Fontenot. I work as the State Vegetable Specialist for the LSU Ag Center. And again, I'm just happy to be here with y'all. So today, let's talk about why you should plant a garden. Planting a garden is so simple. It does not matter how many degrees you have in horticulture or agriculture or agronomy or forestry or anything like that, or if you've had any kind of professional training, if you're a master gardener or not. It doesn't matter if you have a green or brown or black thumb. What matters is that you try, that you actually go outside with a pot of soil and just try planting a few things. Practice makes perfect in this instance. And I know some of you guys listening to this may think, Dr. Fontenot was kind of crazy. I've tried growing things over and over and it's really hard. But what I want to show you is that it can be easy, especially if you follow some tips from the Ag Center. And here's an example of how easy it is to grow vegetable plants. This is the drain hole in the water fountain in J.C. Miller. And this is where we teach horticulture classes on campus. And you can see some clever student drop some tomato seeds down there and they are starting to germinate just by people taking little sips of water. So if we can grow them in the drain holes of water fountains, you can certainly grow them in your backyard. No matter how big or small your yard is, you do have space for a garden. They come in all shapes and sizes. Whether it's like the photo on the left of the large in-ground garden, having a tractor or a tiller, and having big equipment, or if you're more of a person like on the right-hand photo where you just want to garden in a container or a small pallet or something that's easy. Size really isn't important, but there are a few characteristics, no matter how big or little your garden is, that matter. These are tips from great gardeners across our state. So the first is you've got to have adequate sunlight. For the fall garden, it's mostly leafy greens and root crops, and they don't need as much sunlight as the spring crops do. So if you have a little bit shadier of a yard, a fall garden is going to be better for you than a spring garden. You're going to need 5 to 7 hours of direct sunlight a day. That means not where the sun is blocked by a 2-story house or tall trees or any other thing like that, but full-on sunlight hitting that garden to have good yields. Big broccoli has nice sized cabbage heads and cauliflower and that kind of thing. You need access to water because even though we do get about 60 to 65 inches of rain a year in Louisiana, and this year, upwards of 90 plus, it doesn't fall all at the right time. The two key times for watering your vegetable garden are the first 2 weeks after you plant it and when they start to bloom for the spring crops. But you need about an inch a week. You need to have adequate drainage. So if your whole yard looks like one big puddle after a rain, then that's probably not an ideal spot for a vegetable garden. But if you build up with raised beds, you'll be fine. Or if you go with containers on your patio, you'll be fine. Now, you need decent soil, and that means soil with a pH between 5.5 and 7, okay? If the pH is between those two numbers, when you add fertilizer, it will be able to be able to translocate into the plant, right? But if it's too low or too high, then it's completely unavailable to the plant, and it doesn't matter how much Triple 13 or Miracle Grow you dump on it, it just won't be available. The last thing is you need enough soil. So if you're looking at this little pot right here, it's a cute little chair with a pot in it and a tomato growing in it. That's not exactly enough soil to get that tomato all the way through harvesting tomato stages. So when we're talking about container gardens, if it's an individual container or pot, I want you to think about a 5-gallon bucket. The pot or the container you grow in needs to be larger than a 5-gallon bucket size. If you're going in raised beds, you need at least 8 inches of soil in there. That's if you have no intentions of tilling that ground underneath. If you're tilling the ground, it can be shorter because the roots can penetrate through that native soil. But you need a minimum of 8 inches of soil. More than that is fine too, it just gets a little more expensive. All great gardeners plant in the correct season, no matter what their garden size is or what they look like. Here's a few examples of fall garden vegetables. We have Swiss chard, strawberries, lettuce, carrots, cabbage, etc. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a few tips on growing these. So the first crop that we're talking about is broccoli. Broccoli is a fun crop to grow. I've done a lot of commercial field trials for this, but it's super easy in home gardens like you see up here in the top right corner. That broccoli planting actually belongs to Hiller Moore. He's the DA in Baton Rouge. And I like showing this picture because if you have a very stressful job, like you can imagine a district attorney would, then growing broccoli or growing cabbage or growing any kind of fall gardens is going to be really stress reducing for you and make you relax. So in his raised bed here, he has about 3 lines of broccoli. So 3 individual rows going down the side or going down the length of that bed. That's really important to know because broccoli can be spaced 12 to 18 inches apart, but that's down the individual lines. So if you have a 4-foot wide raised bed like you're seeing there, you could have 3 lines of that. So you'd be 12 inches from one broccoli to the next in that same line. But if you go over about 4 to 6 inches, then you can have another broccoli plant like here and here, staggering or kind of planted in triangular fashion, or like you're climbing a ladder down those rows. And you'll still make plenty big plants for a big enough head. Now, broccoli do need a lot of fertilizer. The number one thing I see home gardeners not doing is fertilizing enough. And so what I want y'all to think of is putting down fertilizer before you plant, all right? And then as these vegetable crops start to grow in the fall, most again are leafy greens, root crops. So about 2 to 3 weeks after you plant those crops, I want you to side dress it. Go about 4 to 6 inches away from the base of that plant and apply just a little bit of nitrogen, ammonium sulfate, calcium nitrate, things of that nature work really, really good. Okay? 2 to 3 weeks after that, I want you to put out another little bit of nitrogen. That's going to boost the size of the plant. If your broccoli plant is, say, 3 to feet across, your heads can easily be 8 inches across in diameter, like you see in the grocery store, right? In Louisiana, the varieties of broccoli that do best are going to be Patron and Arcadia. Pac-Man has been around for a long time. The commercial growers still like it. I still like it. But I've seen huge yield increases with Patron and also with Arcadia. Green Magic, Marathon, Castle Dome, Blue Wind, Gypsy, all also really good choices for our climate here. Cauliflower is just like broccoli, except for instead of double drilling it, I want you to single drill it. So if that was that 4-foot wide bed, maybe just 2 lines maximum. Okay, if you have an in-ground garden with 1 row, you just plant a single drill or 1 single line going down the center. Those transplants need to be about, oh, that's totally wrong on the screen, I'm sorry. They need to be 18 inches apart for sure. Okay, this is a big, huge plant. As you see in the top picture, we want those leaves to remain wrapped around the head. If the leaves start falling open, then the head is exposed to sunlight and it'll turn pale yellow, which is kind of gross. If we get an early freeze, it's going to turn kind of grayish purple and nobody will want to eat that, all right? So if you notice that the variety you chose maybe isn't one recommended by us, then rip or break a leaf off the bottom of the plant, wrap it around the head, and allow that plant to continue to grow. Some gardeners will even come and like hug the plant and pull all those leaves together with a piece of twine, like a little package, and tie it. And that is just enough shade to keep that head continuing to grow without being exposed to the sun, so it stays a nice white color. That sounds like too much trouble to you. Then you can plant cauliflower that's supposed to be colorful. You can see down here on the bottom, we have a picture of purple graffiti cauliflower. We have cheddar orange cauliflower. And then there's some green cauliflowers out there as well, like Veronica. Now this particular batch down here is called Colored Mix from Johnny's Seeds. It's a great mix of cauliflower and you don't have to worry about blanching it. Again, lots and lots of fertilizer. Before you plant, 2 to 3 weeks after you plant, and again 2 to 3 weeks after that, put some fertilizer out. Cabbage is another great fall crop to grow. The cabbage rows that you're seeing right here are called Blue Vantage. Blue Vantage is one of my favorite varieties of cabbage because of the beautiful silver color to it. Now, cabbage, like broccoli, are going to be double drilled. So every, 12 to 18 inches, you put a plant from here to here and you stagger it going down the row. So if you look at these 2 rows right here, there's cabbage heads facing to the right and facing to the left as well. So the key to some of these crops like cauliflower and cabbage, these right here are 50-foot rows. So that's 100 cabbage heads on each row. Most people can't eat 100 cabbage heads all at one time. I like it when home gardeners plant a third of their row in transplants, wait 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even a month, plant another third of the row, wait 2 or 3 more weeks, plant the last third of the row. Okay, that's really helpful because it staggers when you're going to harvest those cabbage heads. So what I want you to look at here is the planting window. We can plant cabbage heads actually in late August if you really want to, but September all the way through early March. I would not plant them in December or January because it's just a little too cold for those small transplants. But you have a large window to plant these things. Don't feel pressured to stack your garden full all in one day because you can't eat all of this all in one day or in 1 week. At the bottom, you see a picture of a purple or what we call a red cabbage. These are really nice to grow in Louisiana too, but they take a lot more nitrogen to grow. So for this, if you forget to side dress, you're going to get little ping pong ball sized cabbage heads. You really want to make sure you side dress, give that extra nitrogen to get kind of a decent sized red cabbage, okay? Now, with red or green cabbage, how do you know when to harvest them? I want you to take your hand and push down on it. Think about what a softball feels like. When you put your thumb on the top of a cabbage head and you push into it, it should feel hard like a hand or like a softball. If it feels squishy or like you can hear airspace between the leaves, then that cabbage isn't fully mature and it still needs to create more wrapper leaves on it and grow larger. So you wouldn't harvest it at that point. If you do harvest it early, it's tender, it tastes good, but you're kind of missing out on some of the yields and some of the weight you can get. Spinach is something that, a lot of people overlook, but it tastes really good and you can use it in your smoothies, salads, and mix it up. And artichoke dip is how I like it. Bake it on your chicken. Really add some really good nutrition to your diet with this crop. And it's super easy. You don't have to start transplants ahead of time. You can directly seed it into the ground. I like planting it October through December. I feel like spinach germinates a little bit better when the soil is a little bit cooler, okay? So when those temperatures start to decrease, your spinach comes up quicker. Make sure that if you have clay soil, that you're really not planting that seed too light, and that if you water it in, you water it in a little bit. What happens in clay soil is when we direct seed crops, if we get a big heavy rain, it tends to crust the soil over and form like this really hard layer. And then your seeds are actually germinating underneath the soil. They just don't have the oomph they need to puncture through that soil. So if you have repeatedly tried to direct seed things in your garden and you're not successful in getting a stand, you might just sprinkle the seeds out on top of the soil, and then instead of covering it with the native soil in your garden, go ahead and just put a little bit of potting mix on top. And I find that helps seeds come through easy, especially if you have a lot of clay, and then their roots will grow down into the native soil and do just fine. So with spinach, what I want you guys to do is sprinkle it out into your garden, let it come up. When it's about 5-6 inches tall, cut it, but leave about an inch of green material standing. Side dress it that day you cut it, and it will flush out again. And you can do this 2 or 3 times and get 2 or 3 cuttings or harvests off the same seeded row of spinach. So really easy crop to grow, really nice. Here you see it on a bare row. When I'm growing, and this was in a demonstration garden we had again, when we're growing spinach or lettuce, I really prefer to see mulch, not herbicides used all around it. Not because I love herbicides, that's not the problem, but what you get is a lot of really dirty spinach and lettuce leaves when you don't use mulches right up underneath them. And even with salad spinners and things like that, it's hard to clean them off, and you don't want to taste that grit when you're eating your salads. So leaves, newspapers, pine straws, great, anything like that, and make it nice and dense under that foliage so you don't have rain splashing soil up underneath those leaves. Lettuce, y'all, if you don't plant anything this fall as far as edible crops, if you're just like into your ornamentals and pretty things, that's fine, but I want you to get one hanging basket and I want you to plant some lettuce. Lettuce is so fun, it's so quick. It makes you feel empowered to grow lettuce, okay? It just makes you feel like a good gardener. We can plant that again mid-September all the way through October, even into early November if it's a mild winter. If it's a real cold winter, we might want to end, especially in central Louisiana, in late October with planting it. Y'all can go out with direct seeding leaf lettuces. For bib, butterhead, romaines, icebergs, I would plant the little plants. It usually takes about 4 weeks from a seed to a little transplant size. Spacing them 12 inches apart is mandatory, because when you look at this lettuce study that we grew here, and you're looking at these heads of lettuce, these are double drilled, like I was telling you about the broccoli and the cabbage. So 2 lines on top of each row, but you can see how big these mature size heads get. So they really do, if it's a head lettuce, it needs 12 inches apart, all right? And look at the array of colors that you can grow in the garden. I want y'all to try Lola Rosa, flashy troutback, red salad bowl. Some of these red and purple leaf lettuces are really, really nice. And here's just, this is early on in the fall. This is last fall. This is my house. This is my garden in the backyard. And I love gardening. I garden for a living, and then I go home and I garden. And when I go home and I garden, I like doing it because I can plant things and I don't have to explain it to people. I just go out there and I just do what I want, and nobody's asking me questions, and it's really nice, like Kiki time. I love it. But I wanted to show y'all here. I've got this Green Towers romaine lettuce in the biggest picture down in the far bottom left side. Y'all, my neighbors love this so much. We live in St. Gabriel, and we have a jambalaya cook-off each year, and the kids do mini pot cook-offs. So we get together as neighbors and we practice this. We go and we get bonfires in each other's backyards, and we have these little tiny cast iron pots, and the kids all cook it. Well, my son does not like salads, okay? And my neighbors, their kids don't like salads. But I was like, well, I'm gonna just cut some lettuce. I have so much, and I'm gonna go share it with them. So we started chopping up this romaine with some avocado and cucumbers, tomatoes, and a little bit of ranch dressing. And y'all, those boys love that salad. And then they started requesting it. The boys would actually ride their bikes down to my house and say, can we get some more of that salad for they call it lettuce salad. Can we get some more of that salad for our dinner tonight? And I ended up giving a lot of it to our neighbors, and they really, really liked it. And that's Green Towers. Now, further back, so this is just part of my garden. The rest is kind of going this way. So I have this other picture up front. Up top here, and this, I honestly, like I said, I don't like to explain things in my own backyard, and I don't label things, and I just kind of use leftover seed from trials or whatever I can pick up at the hardware store. So I don't even remember what this variety was of this leaf lettuce here, but it was also delicious. So we were mixing it into salads, and look how pretty it looks. You guys, I hadn't planted those last 3 rows yet, but it's really nice. And I wanted to encourage y'all to do the same thing in your backyard, because I think vegetable gardens add value to the landscape, okay? Not just because I'm a vegetable specialist, because they really are pretty. Carrots, these are great to grow in the fall. The key to carrots is going to be really good tilth to your soil. So you've got to work that soil. If you're in an in-ground garden, you can't just rip up your spring tomatoes and then drill your carrot seed on top. You've got to till that soil. If you're growing in a container on your patio, you've got to take a hand trowel and really work that soil in that. Because even in containers, y'all, that soil starts to settle out and create little hard pans within itself. So stir that soil up, add some fertilizer to it, sprinkle your lettuce seed on top of the soil. Carrots and lettuce, if you're going to grow lettuce by seed, not just by transplants, both require a little bit of sunlight to germinate. So if you plant, say you take your finger or the back of your shovel and you dig a little trench and you put your carrot seed in there and then you cover it up and then you water it in, it's going to sink even further, and the sunlight's not going to be able to penetrate into there, and you're going to get very poor stands. So if you put it on top of the soil and you pound it into the soil, not pound it, but tamp it right into the soil with the back of your hoe or the back of your shovel, and then gently water it in, you'll get really good stands of carrots. On containers and raised beds, I just sprinkle it throughout, and then I water it in immediately, and it just sort of sinks into that soil, and we get really good stands of carrots. The top picture shows the time period when I usually start thinning them out. So what I do is, because you want your carrots every 1 to 2 inches apart, I just sprinkle them out there. I don't worry about spacing them with a ruler. And as they come up and they're about, 8 inches tall or so, the tops, that's when I start thinning them out. You get these real little slender carrots that taste nice and good. The rest of the carrots that are remaining in your garden then size up, right? They get that 1 inch in diameter and that 7 to 8 inch length on them. Lots of varieties that do well: Purple Haze, Deep Purple, I'm trying to think of another one, Sugar Snacks. Any of the carrot seed from Johnny Seed usually does really well. But again, the key is good soil tilth. Now, artichokes are another fun fall crop. This kind of elevates that garden to the elegant level, in my opinion. Artichokes are going to be 4 feet wide by 4 feet wide. You're probably just going to go out and buy a transplant because you can see here it takes 12 weeks from seed to transplant. We want to get these in late September, October, early November, okay? In central Louisiana, early November may be pushing it for y'all. You put those transplants in, I'd say at least 3 feet, maybe 4 feet apart going down the row. Or if you want it in a container, pick a container that's at least 2 feet wide by 2 feet deep, like a nice big container. You're going to plant that transplant in there. It looks like a thistle plant, right? I don't know if you can really see the leaves here, but it's got those jagged leaves. A lot of people think they look like weeds when they're first going by, and I've actually seen people weed out artichoke plants. I'm like, no, that's the plant we want. But it's related to the thistle. It grows up when that choke, right, or the flower brackets are nice and closed at the top. That's when you want to pick them. Generally in Louisiana, they only get about 3 to 4 inches wide. We don't get those huge ones like you see at the grocery store here. So you want to cut them. So you can cut them right there at the top, but they're actually like a flower shoot. So they're on the stem that comes up from the base of the plant. So I usually cut the artichoke off, but then I go down and I cut that base of the stem off also, and that allows more chokes to keep developing. It's kind of like deadheading your roses or your daisies or anything else. The more you deadhead, the more you cut these off and eat them, the more they send up. Now the thing is, we plant this in the fall, but you're not going to actually see those shoots coming up until the spring, okay? So it's probably going to be late March, early April, mid-April before they start coming up. And they're going to continue coming up until it just gets, Louisiana hot, right? Where it's just miserable and gross outside. And then the whole plant starts to die back. Now, technically, y'all, this is a perennial crop, but it does get pretty full of disease in the summer. I usually just rip them out and start fresh in the fall. I do know some people in Louisiana that baby them along in the summer and get them to come back year after year. But to me, it's just worth it to replant it. But it's up to you guys. Now, artichokes, to get, 10, 12, 20 chokes on one plant, you got to feed them a lot. So you want to put lots of compost, lots of fertilizer into that row. And once a month, as they're growing, I go down and side dress them with a little bit of extra nitrogen, okay? So those are some of my favorite vegetables to grow in the fall. And there's lots of herbs that y'all can grow in the fall too. And I know Michael is going to come on later and tell you how to use them, so I'm not going to go into any of that. But these are probably my top 7 herbs that I think every vegetable farmer or vegetable gardener should have in the vegetable garden or near or around your yard. And the reason why I'm a big herb fan is because, yes, it does enhance flavor and it makes food taste good, but also it attracts pollinators to the garden. And when we think about our fall gardens, they're mostly leafy crops and we don't need pollinators there to actually get the produce that we want. But we do need pollinators for our spring gardens. So if in the fall you start planting things like dill and oregano and parsley and borage, and you let some of it go to flower, then you'll start attracting those pollinators early to the garden so that when it comes mid-March to early April and you start putting in your pumpkin, or not your pumpkins, but your squash and your cucumbers and all your melons, those pollinators are already going to know where you're at because they're going to be visiting those flowers on those herbs, and then you're going to have attracted them there for that spring garden that you need. But you have to think ahead of time and put them in the fall garden. So chives are fun. Now chives would be the one herb that I show you here that I would cut those flowers off of because you really want to encourage, you want to eat the foliage, right? Or maybe even the bottom part of the plant, the root part. So chives, I would probably cut the flowers off of that. But chamomile and borage, chamomile, we use the flowers to make tea, right? Borage is used to flavor meats and all kinds of different things. Plus borage flowers, the blue flowers are just so beautiful, right? So those I would encourage y'all to let go to seed. Same with the cilantro, okay? Cilantro and coriander are actually the same plant. We plant it in the fall. I always think of it as like something that should be planted in the warm season because, you eat lots of salsa in the summertime and it goes in salsa, but it does better in the cool weather here. As soon as it starts getting really hot, it starts petering out and kind of dying back, and it looks real, just like it's about to die. Like it starts looking like it's, I don't know how to explain it, just droopy, even though you're watering it. So cilantro, if you want just the leaves for your salsas or whatever else you're cooking with, then you would want to continue to cut back those flower heads. But if you want to attract the pollinators, let the flowers open up and let it go to seed. And then you have the coriander, right, which is a different flavor, which is also used in cooking. Dill and parsley, they attract lots of butterflies. You can plant those in the spring, but if you plant them in the fall, you get to enjoy them, all fall long and all winter long. And then when it comes to the spring, the butterflies come and land on them and they let their babies eat all down, and then you let them enjoy it in the spring, right? Oregano, another great one for spaghetti, definitely great for planting in the fall here in Louisiana. If you need lots of tips on how to grow herbs, we have this wonderful new publication out. If you just go to Google and you type in herb gardening in Louisiana, LSU Ag Center, or just LSU, this will be one of the first links that pops up. Y'all, it has about 65 different spices and herbs that you can grow easily here in Louisiana in it, and all the information in there you need to know on how to plant it. So those would be my tips. Now, as far as growing gardens and thinking about what great gardeners do, right? Like those guys who you drive by and they always have a good looking vegetable garden. They check their gardens often. They're going out there weekly and they're scouting for worms. They're not going to let those worms eat them down in the fall, because that's probably our #1 insect in the fall. They're going to write down what they do and they're going to rotate. If you only have 1 or 2 raised beds, you can't keep putting the same types of crops in there, right? We've got to go from broccoli in the winter to a tomato in the spring, and you can't follow up with a potato. You see what I'm saying? Tomato to potato, because they're related. You got to go back into lettuce or something else. So write down what you do and mix those vegetables up. Don't always put your tomatoes in the same spot of the garden. Plant in the correct season, like we've talked about. Space appropriately. So the tighter you put your vegetables in the garden, the more disease you're going to have and the more insect problems you're going to have. Because if one plant has a little bit of bacteria or fungus on it, it's going to easily roll onto the leaves of this one and onto the leaves of this one when you're watering or when it's raining. And insects like little tight niches. So you want to space plants appropriately. That's why with these herbs, we give y'all their average mature height and width, so that you know, okay, if the width of this chamomile can get up to 2 feet wide, I'm not going to put a chamomile every 10 inches, right? I'm going to spread them out a little bit more. Water at the base of your plants to avoid spreading fungus. Use soaker hoses, get a big wand with like a long handle on it so that you can get down to the base of those plants without bending over. That's really important. Plant strength from their roots, right? They don't I wouldn't pour Coke on my hair, I'd pour it in my mouth. We wouldn't pour, water on the hair of the plant, right? We'd want to put it at its mouth. Feed plants. I can't tell y'all, fertilize, fertilize, fertilize. Add compost. If you add manures, wonderful. Just make sure they're completely aged, because I don't want any of y'all coming to us with salmonella or listeria problems. So aged manures, like at least 6 months old, all right? And if you do choose to use pesticides, whether that's an herbicide or a fungicide or an insecticide, make sure that you follow the label. So if it says, 1 ounce of this insecticide per gallon of water, 1.5 ounces is not a good idea. You're just going to create resistance, and then it's not going to work for you or your neighbors a couple years down the road. So really follow the directions on that kind of thing. The Ag Center has tons of great resources for you guys out there. The Louisiana Home Vegetable Gardening book with the dark green cover and all the vegetables on the front is great for you guys that have big, huge gardens. We give you information by the 100-foot row in there, also by the 10-foot row. The Louisiana Vegetable Planting Guide in the center, you can Google that and see it has big charts in it, when to plant each of our vegetable crops, how far to space them, how deep to plant their seed, and all kinds of varieties that we recommend here at the Ag Center. Horticulture Hints is a wonderful newsletter. It doesn't just give vegetable advice, but it gives turf grass, ornamental advice, great stuff for you guys. And if any of you guys are more into growing a raised bed or a container of vegetables, then the Louisiana Urban Gardener book, which is available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and places like that, is super good for you because it's really detailed information on how to make something grow just in a single pot, like how much fertilizer to put, how much soil you need, when to put it in the ground, all that kind of stuff.